Hey, gang, before we begin today's podcast, let's talk about education in Arkansas and what we think should happen. We believe education is the silver bullet. It's the way to pull those less fortunate out of the cycle of poverty, out of places of low opportunity. And we should discuss how to solve the very real education problems we do have in the state of Arkansas. But the point here is we should have an open conversation, an honest conversation, where all the key stakeholders come to the table and have a say. That's not what happened in the last legislative session with the LEARNS Act. That's not even close to what happened. Also, we believe that private schools and some charter schools are valuable parts of the education system in Arkansas. They teach kids the right way. They don't need to be disbanded, but neither does public education. We feel that strong, well-funded public schools are needed in Arkansas to provide those opportunities for a greater number of kids. The LEARNS Act does not help public education in Arkansas. The removing of funds from public schools, giving them to private schools that don't have any local oversight, by definition means that public schools must compete in an unfair environment. It's rigging the system against public schools. The LEARNS Act takes away local control of schools. Now, enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us this morning on our Purple Pod. Joining us today is Veronica McClane with Citizens for Arkansas Public Education and Students. My wife is a teacher. There are lots of women in our family are teachers. Teachers affect students every day across the state, and we're going to have a great conversation today about what the CAPES project is doing and where we are today. But first, Veronica, just tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you come to this project?
Thanks for having me on. And I've been I'm a product of public schools here in Little Rock. Grew up going to LRSD schools and got a wonderful education and finished out at the University of Arkansas in Little Rock. And Euler is what they used to call it. I think They've changed it now, but and so I actually am a social worker by trade. And so I work as a mental health clinician for my paying job. And LRSD, we had to fight pretty hard to get our district back from state control.
Yes.
And so that was when I really started paying attention to what was going on with public education and just seeing the way that they just blatantly took away our rights when they did the state takeover. We were being taxed without representation, and they're doing that to multiple districts. And the reason when they took us over, we had a few schools that were D or F schools, even though I won't talk about those ratings. That's, I think, a whole nother podcast there. But by the time they were done, we had more schools that were considered D or F. And so the state takeovers are about more than trying to help students, and everybody is aware of that, right? And so I started with some other folks here in Little Rock. We started Friends of Public Education. It started out Friends of LRSD, and we're now Friends of Public Education Network. It's a group on Facebook where we have a few districts. So we've got LRSD, PCSD, Conway schools, North Little Rock schools. We have a group out of Pine Bluff for the Pine Bluff School District. And we've just started a Crittenden County group. And we did that because there's a few districts in that area. And I know I'm Cabot, they'll kill me if I forget them. We also have Cabot School District Group too. And so these groups are, one, to talk about both local issues for local school districts,
Sure.
but also to talk about the state level policies that are coming into play that impact us at the community level. And so as a social worker, we look at the policies that impact people. So anyway, I could nerd out
Sure.
on policy for hours. Anyway, so with these groups, I became very involved. I've also done work with Grassroots Arkansas, and I worked on the Pay Our Educators Coalition that was operating over the summer. And so I'm very passionate about public education, and the LEARNS Act has been a punch in the gut to those of us who have been in the fight for public ed. And just in talks with some other folks, we decided, let's go for this thing. Let's do a ballot question committee. And we all came as individuals. We didn't come as our groups because our goal has been to leave the partisan things aside, right? Because some groups get labeled as the radical left, or it just whatever happens there. But I think that with public education and how the Learns Act was passed and how we saw all of that play out, I think that a lot of people have realized some things now about, are they really trying to help public education, or are they trying to destroy it?
Well, the
So,
rhetoric started out pretty mean, didn't it? When Sarah was running for governor, the indoctrination word was flown around quite a bit. And my mother was a teacher in the El Dorado school system for 25 years, but I don't know her to be someone that would have indoctrinated anyone. My wife is a school teacher. She's not an indoctrinator. Most teachers have such a passion for their kids, it becomes such an emotional connection that there's not a political agenda there. And right off the bat, we're told that teachers are indoctrinating kids and there's some sort of liberal agenda. This is Arkansas. There's
I
not
know.
a ton of liberals in Arkansas. They have rights to talk about their opinions just like anyone else. The rhetoric from the beginning was so anti teacher that I think it really caused a lot of people to open their eyes and say, hey, what's going on here? We saw that in the Conway School District, and thankfully, school board elections went the way they needed to go. Let's turn to the ballot initiative that you have going. The first round, the title round with the Attorney General, did not go well, did it?
No, I would say the first two rounds didn't really go well,
Okay,
but one of the biggest issues that we've encountered with trying to write the ballot title is that you have to summarize the policy. You have to summarize the act. And so summarizing a 145-page act that completely dismantles a lot of things about public education has been our biggest hurdle through all of this. And we, with the third submission, we got it down, but the first couple, we were way too brief on what we were saying. And you could argue a lot of things. It was a messy process.
I think
And
it's
then
designed to be that way, isn't it?
I think so too. Someday, I think that the people of Arkansas need to try to figure out a way to make this process easier,
Sure.
because the hurdle should be getting the signatures and getting it on the ballot. It shouldn't be writing the ballot title. And why, let's do a constitutional amendment that every piece of legislation that comes through has to include a legislative copy of a ballot title, right? For the people. I think that's my
Interesting.
next dream there, right?
I like that one.
Mhm.
I like that a
Well,
lot. I think it intends to, if you don't want it to be overturned, then maybe more people need to be included in the process.
exactly. And we could even add in some things. Where did you get this draft of the bill, and who's pushing for it? Who will it hurt? A policy analysis, right?
Is this the same as other voucher programs in other states that's being pushed?
Yeah, it's very similar. There are obviously some differences, and I follow a lot of the public education stuff around the country, and this is a calculated attack on public education that has been building for years and years. It started with charters. And here's the thing: in some places, charters work, but we all overwhelmingly we know that the impacts of charters and vouchers and things like this negatively impact our communities and the education that our students are getting. And so the research shows that this is not an effective way to help students, and it really destabilizes communities when this happens.
The vouchers themselves seem to be one that people want to applaud, want to say, hey, let's have the choice. Let's make sure that our school systems are competitive in nature. For some reason, they think that because if it's run like a business, it's going to be more competitive and give a better result. I'm not sure that's the case. But if that's the case, then why are we going to give this tax dollars to private entities that the school board doesn't even control? We're actually taking the school board and the public elected officials that we've put in place out of the process. And I don't know that a lot of people realize that their local school board doesn't have any say over private schools. I don't know how much they have over charter schools.
None, at least in Arkansas. Charter schools operate under the State Board of Education. And so they can also apply for and are more easily given waivers for to a lot of different rules. So the rules and the standards that public education schools, traditional public ed, what they operate under, those standards oftentimes are waived for the public funded charter schools. And so these can be waivers like certified teachers. It could be access to certain programming. It could be offering of courses. It could be just any number of things. Charters can get waivers very easily. And I love that you pointed out how vouchers are taking away our elected representation of the way that our tax dollars are being spent. And also, this whole concept of school choice, it's a misnomer. We're talking about what it is schools choosing students.
Yes.
Whereas the public schools are the great equalizer. And this idea of running schools like a business makes children the product. Children are not products. The service should be the education.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be every child, every single child, I don't care what your learning needs are, where you live, should have a public education option within walking distance or near to their home, where their families can easily get to the school, where they can engage, and the community is focused around this school, because well-educated people make happy, healthy communities, right?
Yes.
And when we're talking about vouchers and taking funding away, and the way that these vouchers are written, because I've read this bill multiple times. I feel like I wrote a thesis on it, right? So the way that it's written, we are seeing they're going to get 90% of the per pupil funding
Yes.
that will follow the child. 5% of that will go to the banks. 5% will go to the banks that are then managing these funds.
Which banks?
Exactly. We don't know. That's part of the rules making process. And I'll give them some credit. They're not just cutting checks to parents. So there is going to be some regulation here. And it's all based on the child's performance. So if there is a stipulation in there that a lot of people have not been talking about, if the child fails to perform well in the private school and they kick them out, they're no longer eligible for a voucher.
Yeah, but the child has to get there first. And you see the change in rhetoric from parental choice at the very early stages of this to school choice, because school choice is accurately what it is. The schools get to choose. And every private school I know of has a long waiting list, a year, maybe two for some. And that's if the tuition's 12,000, the voucher gives them seven, there or eight. There's another 4,000 that a family that probably hasn't been spending that extra 4,000 on school has to spend now. That's not affordable. That's not going to happen for them. So they're economically still going to be unable to do it, because many of the schools will raise their tuitions. We will see that. And B, the schools get to choose, and there is no criteria on the choice. They don't answer to anyone but themselves. So is a family that has another $5,000 to donate for the athletic fund at the school going to get selected, or is the rural family that's willing to make the travel time and investment to drive 30 minutes every morning to drop their kid off for school, are they going to get selected? And I think we all know the answer to that. It's about money, and when you follow the money, and also with your banking question, how many of those banks are on the donor sheets of the governor and the legislatures that voted for this, and the legislative representatives that voted for this? That's a huge question for me, and I think we will see as the rules process continues that will be a difficult part of the process. I think it's important that, at least for listeners, to understand what the ballot title is. This is what appears, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's what appears when you go to the voting booth. That title, and sometimes they are very lengthy, but that title is the summary, basically, of what you're trying to do. Correct?
Yes, yes. And so there are certain rules that in past Arkansas Supreme Court judgments or decisions where they have said, it started out, you have to have something that could reasonably be read by an average Arkansan within 5 minutes of being in the voting booth. Then recently, because things get longer over time, right, and more detailed, now the standard is 10 minutes. How do you summarize 145 pages into something that could reasonably be read within 10 minutes, but also make sure that it is encompassing everything that might cause a voter to pause or reflect on that could contribute to their voting for or against? So there's a lot of gray in this, and no matter what we write, somebody's going to find something that they could have standing to say, no, I'm going to challenge that in court. So with the Attorney General's office, their approval of our ballot title is saying, we approve, this is the most reasonable option for this. This is what we think is appropriate. Go collect your signatures. When we go get our signatures, the Secretary of State will approve the signatures.
Yes.
And verify them and make sure. And so we could have all of that done. We've met the requirements, all of this, and somebody could still come in and sue us and say, your ballot title was misleading, or it didn't include A, B, or C, or whatever. And then someone could separately sue and say, your signatures were false or whatever. So we could have two lawsuits against us. At this point, in this part of the process, the Attorney General will back us because they signed off on the petition and they said, this is an appropriate ballot title. It meets the standards under the law. So they're then defending us or helping. We'll have our own people, I'm sure, but they're helping us out because they did their due diligence leading up to approving our ballot title.
Is there anything in the rules process that could then go back and invalidate your ballot title?
The Supreme Court could. So they could rule if somebody sues after we've collected signatures, the Supreme Court of Arkansas could come in and say, yeah, this wasn't good.
What about the rules process for the LEARNS Act? Because they still don't have all the rules in place for that.
So with the LEARNS Act, somebody could file a lawsuit against the LEARNS Act. And there has been a lot of discussions about whether or not the LEARNS Act is constitutional, because the Arkansas Constitution does require certain standards for public education. There is, within the Arkansas Constitution, certain standards that are meant to be met with public education. Many have argued, and I think they have standing based on past rulings, to say that the LEARNS Act is unconstitutional. And then we even add in the emergency clause piece of it, right, that we're fighting right now, because they wrote in an emergency clause that made it become effective at sine die May 1st. And that is causing a domino effect of harm before the people have even had a chance to have a say, because we know everybody that was watching what went down during the session when they were discussing the LEARNS Act, the people did not have a say. Watching elected officials cry and shake, saying they know that it's wrong and they don't want to vote for this because they know that it's wrong and it's not what the people that elected them want, but they do it anyway. That was wrong. That was wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. But they're not voting their conscience. They're being threatened almost, it seems like, politically. And we're seeing those consequences that you're talking about now. Arkansas Times reporting with the Elaine Marvel School District this morning. The lawsuit there, they announced in April that they're laying off pretty much the whole school system, all the teachers, all the bus drivers, all the administrators. And that lawsuit's continuing forward. Where do we stand on this Emergency Act? And how is this going to get settled? Because it seems like they're proceeding with handing over that school district, and I don't even know what that does to Friday night football or anything else, but they're handing over that school district to a charter school, a private entity. Everyone's losing their jobs, and they can reapply later for obviously a different pay, and they lose seniority, things like that. This is really devastating for rural school districts, isn't it?
It is. And that's one of the things that the lawsuit filed by Allie Noland is meant to fight. So she put it in as a temporary restraining order request and to hold off until at least August, so that, it would do a couple of things. It would stop whatever the heck is happening in Marble Lane. And we have to think about the other districts that are at risk of the same. Those transformation contracts are a failure of the state. And instead of them taking responsibility and doing better, they're selling off the districts that they have failed to the highest bidder. And it saves them money.
Tax dollars built those schools. Who does that property pass to? Who owns that property? The charter gets that property. So the community who paid for it and built it, do they pay the community for that property? Are they paying a fair price for that property? Or are they just being handed it?
No, they're just being handed it. And that's one of the things that became an issue in the Little Rock School District, because when the state took over and we lost our elected officials, they started closing our schools and then selling them for the cheapest amount to charters. And so it was all a power grab.
This is all something that has, I think, cross-party appeal. This is not partisanship. If you live in a rural community, a school means jobs for the caterers or the food companies, the vendors that supply things to the schools. It's Friday night football, it's cheer, it's baseball, it's basketball. There's an entire community built around the school. I guess there's no guarantee that all of that stays the same. Will the charter schools continue the extracurricular activities? All of that has positive community benefits. I think we would agree.
In the conversations that I have had, when you really sit down and talk to people about public education and what they believe, and you take away the buzzwords that get thrown out there, indoctrination and school choice and this and that, and you really
Radical
just break it
agenda
down.
and
Exactly. We all want the same things.
yeah.
We want our children to be happy and safe and healthy. And we want children that don't have the same opportunities to at least have the same equal, equitable access to education. But that's the thing, is like, what are the things that make this experiment that is America special? And part of it is our access to public education. We have been failing because it is a constant fight over how that's funded, how we determine who learns what, this and that, and making sure that we are providing education that works for everyone at a basic level. So when we think about children with special education needs, the basic level should be way above where it is now, because we have to be able to say at the end of high school that this child was given the best starting chance in an education that they could get. And then if we go on to the other pieces of that, everybody should leave high school with at least some basic understanding. We're not doing that well. And instead of fixing the problem, they're making it worse with vouchers. The Learns Act does not give classified staff raises. They run these schools. Your aides, the school maintenance staff, the bus drivers, the people that, within the community that come together, they are just as important as the educators. And the Learns Act doesn't help them in any way.
You bring up the raise, and I've always thought that the raise had at least one strong possibility of being that poison pill for the school system. Some can't afford it. There's a reason why the salaries are lower. But the raise also is going to exacerbate local school systems to where they're going to have to go to whatever authority it is. They're going to have to try to pass millage increases, because we fund a lot of the school systems and the school districts through our property taxes. Property taxes in a state like Texas, which has no income tax, property taxes are 5-6 times what they are here or more. And someone that's paying $1,500 property tax may be paying $12,000 in the state of Texas. Now, that is also linked to home values, but school systems that need more cash, since they're losing it through the Learns Act, and since they've been saddled with additional salary requirements, don't we think this is going to affect what our property taxes are throughout the state?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're even seeing something along those lines. I believe it's Mountain Home, where they have an issue with their school buildings that they need to be rebuilt. Without regular maintenance and things, we have to rebuild things. And so they tried to pass a millage and it didn't pass. And now what happens with their students? I don't know all the details of that. If we're looking at what a community like Marble or Lane
Sure.
can afford versus what people in West Little Rock, Arkansas can afford.
Or where I live, Fayetteville.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And they keep saying the zip code shouldn't determine the access to education that your child gets. And Sarah says that a lot. And a lot of school choice proponents, voucher proponents say that. But then if that's the case, giving vouchers still doesn't fix the problem. Change the funding source. Why should property taxes determine how a public education, how a facility or how a public school is being funded?
Let's move on to the next steps Let's say your title gets approved by the AG. What happens? What does your organization need after that in order to get this initiative, to get this on the ballot? I'm sure you're very well aware of what you got to do next.
So legally, we have to have 54,422 signatures
Where does that
from,
number come from?
it is 6% of the registered voters who voted in the last gubernatorial election.
Okay.
That number is officially 54,422. We know through the culling of signatures, because they still do all of this by hand, and if it's illegible, if somebody wrote the wrong county, if they feel like the notary wasn't being a good notary or something, they can throw out whole sheets of signatures. You get 10 signatures per sheet. If there's a mistake on one signature on a signature of 10, so 1 out of the 10, then all of them get thrown out on that page. And really, we need like 90,000 signatures
Okay.
from registered voters in the state.
Where do those have to come from?
So it used to be 15 counties. They just changed the law to 50.
50
And
counties.
so, yes. Now we're okay. We have at least 54. We have volunteers in at least 54 counties. We have 75 counties in Arkansas. So we've been mapping all of that out, and we have plans for that. What we need is money to pay for. We're an all volunteer organization, so we need money to help pay for printing, right? We have to
Sure.
carry around a copy of the LEARNS Act and our ballot title
You've
with
got to
us.
carry around 140 pages of the LEARNS Act.
Yeah, we'll have to carry that around. So we've got some fancy clipboards that are going to help us do that. And if people can find it in their hearts to support us, we wouldn't be mad about it. We have some funding, some
Where do they
landing
go?
sites.
Where do they go?
We have two options. You can go to goodchange.org. I'll have to give you our links. But Good Change is a newer company that helps with fundraising here in Arkansas, where you can do a roundup. It's really cool. You can sign up for this, and so at the end of each month, it will round up purchases. So say you spent $5.90 on something, it would round up to the next whole dollar. So you don't really notice that money is coming out.
Sure.
And it's pulling that amount. And so at the end of each month, then that would come to CAPES. And so it's a really cool option. You can also do one-time donations with them or a monthly recurring donation. And we also have a Fund Hero account. And again, I'll make sure to get you these links.
Do you have a donation button on your website?
We do.
Okay.
We do.
And your website is?
saynotolearns.org.
Okay. Say No to Learns. I love that. And we can also find you on Twitter where?
At ARK Capes. And we're also on Facebook. We have a TikTok. We have an Instagram. We're all over the socials, right? And we try to help educate people about what's going on, and also just highlighting the great things about our public schools here in Arkansas, because a lot of them are amazing. A lot of our educators are amazing. We have wonderful students throughout the state that are doing amazing things, and you don't have to go to some fancy schmancy school to be a great student.
I agree with that. I think I'm a product of public schools. Just about everyone I know is, but the private schools and charter schools have their place. I think the thing that we're all worried about is the fact that there's no accountability there. When you turn tax dollars over to a private entity, and you no longer have control of how those funds are spent, of what the curriculum is, or anything else. And I think that is the most important thing I think we can get out there. Perhaps we can talk again about some of your next functions as far as getting the word out for signing the petition.
Absolutely. I could talk about public education for hours. Appreciate the opportunity to come on. And if people want to sign up to help on our website, they can sign up. Again, we're all volunteers, so we need all the help we can get. And yeah, let's keep talking about this. It's important. Public education is the great unifier.
I agree. Right? It's the silver bullet. It's what helps us move forward as a country. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.